Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories about camping in the Appalachian wilderness. One camper found a figure with no face just standing between the trees, watching. Another woke up to whispering, and 5 black streaks smeared across the tent wall, like someone had been marking it. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now let's get into it. I've been solo camping for a little over 10 years now. No group trips, just me, my pack, and somewhere quiet off the grid where I don't have to talk to anyone. I've hit most of the eastern mountain trails at least once, but there was this stretch of the Appalachians I'd never touched. Somewhere along the border between North Carolina and Tennessee. The maps barely cover it, and the trails don't really have names. A friend of mine, Liam, who works as a park ranger, told me about this old service road off Highway 143. It doesn't have signs or cell reception, just this rusted metal gate and a dirt path that disappears into the trees. He said it used to be used by forest crews a long time ago, but no one goes out there now. I remember asking why. He just said people stopped. Said it felt off. That sounded perfect to me. I headed out in late October, a few days before Halloween. When I parked at the edge of that road, mine was the only car around. Locked it up, shouldered my gear, and started walking. There wasn't really a trail, more like a narrow game path, overgrown and rough, winding through brush and steep rock. I hiked in about 5 miles until I hit a narrow ridgeline. From up there, I could see the valley below just blanketed in trees, nothing man-made in sight. No fences, no rooftops, just woods. I pitched my tent not far from the drop-off, made a ring out of stones, boiled some of that vacuum-sealed beef stew I keep for trips. As the sun went down, I stoked the fire a little and leaned back against my pack. It was quiet. A few scattered leaf drops, maybe a stick cracked now and then, but nothing close. When it got fully dark, I zipped up inside the tent and knocked out around 10:30. Slept solid through the night. Next morning, I woke up to fog. No sound at all, not even birds. Normally you hear something, even in late October, but that morning, it was like the forest was on mute. No squirrels, no crows, nothing. I figured it was just the elevation messing with things, so I went out for a bit, did a short ridge hike. Still no signs of people, no cigarette butts or footprints, no cut ropes or even broken twigs from heavy boots. It felt untouched, which was exactly what I came for. I got back to camp early afternoon, pulled out my field journal, started sketching the surrounding hills like I usually do. That's when I noticed something odd. About 15 feet down the path, right in the middle of the trail, there was this branch standing straight up. Looked like someone had jammed it into the ground hard. Bark was stripped, not natural, not fallen. I walked over, pulled it out, tossed it into the woods. Didn't see any other footprints or marks. Still, I felt not watched exactly, just aware, you know? I stayed close to camp the rest of the day, cooked, read a bit, didn't go far. That night, things got weird. I climbed into the tent around 10 again, let the fire burn down. I lay there listening for any usual night sounds, but it was just silence. I mean, total silence. Like even the bugs had packed up and left. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up, not to a sound or a shake or anything. Just eyes open, wide awake. And that's when I noticed how still it was. No wind, no leaves rustling, just nothing. Then I heard this whispering. At first I thought maybe I was dreaming or half asleep, but it kept going. Real soft, breathy, not actual words, just lips moving sounds, like someone trying to talk without making noise. It was coming from right behind the tent, low to the ground. Then it moved, slowly, around the tent. I didn't breathe, just stared straight up at the ceiling fabric. The sound circled me, soft and steady. Then I felt something brush against the wall of the tent, like fingertips dragging across the nylon. Once, twice, a third time, right at the base where the fabric meets the ground. Then the whispering stopped. but the footsteps didn't. They weren't loud, bare feet, slow, uneven, shuffling. One loop, then another, then another, then nothing. I lay frozen. I didn't even blink. My arms were pulled in tight against my chest, and my hands were clammy. I felt every beat of my heart like it was rattling in my ribs. Then something scraped down the side of the tent. A hand. 5 long fingers. I could see the outline through the fabric, dragging from top to bottom, smooth and slow. I waited, I don't know how long, probably close to an hour before I finally unzipped the door and peeked out. It was just barely getting light, maybe 5:30. The fire pit was cold. There were no prints, no damage, nothing that screamed, hey, something was here, except for one thing. 5 streaks across the tent wall. Thin, black marks, like someone had smeared charcoal or wet ash down it in 5 clean lines. I didn't stop to eat, didn't break anything down carefully. I crammed everything into my pack, collapsed the tent as fast as I could, and got moving. About half a mile down the trail, I saw another branch. Same as before, bark stripped, planted straight up in the center of the path. This time, I didn't touch it, just stepped around. 2 minutes later, another one, then another. They kept showing up faster, closer together. I counted 17 of them before I hit the road again. And then I saw it. There was a figure standing just behind the trees near where I'd parked. Not moving, not walking toward me, just there. It was tall, too tall, and thin, arms too long, fingers just hanging. It didn't sway or shift or anything, just stood there, slightly leaning, like it was waiting for something. I got in the car so fast I don't even remember unlocking it. Slammed the door, started the engine, tore out of there with rocks clattering off the wheel wells. I didn't look back. Not once. I made it to a diner just off the highway, maybe 30 miles away. Parked, went inside, ordered coffee and pancakes. Just sat there, watching the window, listening. Nothing followed me, not that I saw anyway, but I kept that tent. Haven't washed it, the black marks are still there. Folded it up exactly how it was that morning and shoved it in the garage. It stays there now, and I don't go near the Appalachians anymore. I'm Luke. I'm 32 and I do pest control out of Asheville. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and I've been doing it long enough that not much surprises me anymore. Except maybe how often people let raccoons live in their attic for 6 months before calling someone. Between work and all the usual chaos, clients, paperwork, friends calling with quick favors, I try to disappear into the woods most weekends. I don't do bars, I don't like crowds, and I hate making small talk with strangers. Give me a tent, a campfire, and just enough cell signal to check the weather, and I'm good. There's one rule I've always kept when I go out. Don't solo camp. Not ever. I've seen too much. People go missing in those woods more than anyone talks about. Sometimes it's a fall, hypothermia, maybe they just got turned around and wandered too far. But sometimes, they're just gone, like no trace. Their car's still in the lot, their camp's untouched. It's like they stepped out to take a leak and never came back. So when my buddy Travis backed out of our trip to Pisgah 2 days before we were supposed to go, I should have just canceled. I really should have. But I'd been looking forward to it all week. Work had been hell. Rodents in a nursing home. Termites in a kid's daycare. And I needed the reset. I figured if I just kept it to one night, stuck close to the trailhead and brought my rifle, I'd be fine. Just a quick in and out. Nothing ambitious. I pulled into the Harmon Ridge Trail lot around noon that Friday. Weather was solid, dry, cool, nothing dramatic, the kind of day where everything feels a little too quiet. But I didn't think much of it. I strapped on my pack and headed in along a trail I'd done a couple times before. Familiar enough that I didn't need to check GPS every 10 minutes, which I liked. I passed 2 hikers coming out, older couple, maybe late 60s. We nodded at each other the way you do out there. After that, I didn't see anyone. No other hikers, no campers, just birds, a squirrel or two, and the occasional crack of something moving in the brush. Normal stuff. I picked a spot about 3 miles in. It was decent. Flat ground, soft pine litter underfoot, and some dense rhododendrons around two sides that gave decent cover. Maybe 100 feet off the main trail. Far enough to not be visible, close enough to reach quickly if I needed to. I set up camp, filtered some water from the stream, and gathered a little firewood. Nothing fancy, just a small fire to heat up my freeze-dried chili and keep the dark at bay. Things stayed quiet until just after dusk. I was sitting by the fire, eating, when I heard something up the ridge behind me. Hoofbeats, or what I thought were hoofbeats. Slow, heavy, not a run, more like a steady plodding. I figured it was a deer, maybe an elk, though I hadn't seen one that far down the trail before. I turned on my headlamp and scanned the trees, but there was no eyeshine. Nothing moved. Whatever it was, it walked for about a minute and then it stopped. I didn't hear it again. I put the fire out around 10, zipped up the tent, and crawled into my sleeping bag. I was tired enough that I didn't think much about the earlier noise. The woods were dead quiet, but that's not unusual after dark. Sometimes it just shuts down out there. I woke up sometime after 2 in the morning. No alarm, no dreams, just this sound. Soft at first, like a low rumble, but it got clearer the longer I stayed still. It was rocks. Rocks being dragged. That scraping, grinding sound like someone was pulling a boulder over loose gravel. It was close, 30, maybe 40 feet away, right near where the fire pit had been. I held my breath and listened. At first I thought maybe a raccoon or bear had gotten into something, but this wasn't shuffling or rummaging. It was steady, heavy, and slow. And then I heard the breathing. Not the kind of breathing you expect from an animal. It was too labored, wet. Each inhale sounded like it was coming through fluid, like someone was trying to suck air through a lung full of blood. It was slow, uneven, like it hurt. I sat up carefully and reached for my rifle, which I always keep next to the sleeping bag when I'm out there. Held it across my lap and didn't make a sound. Didn't even touch the zipper. The breathing stopped. Then the footsteps started. Not fast, not loud, just one at a time, spaced out. Like whatever it was walking in a slow circle around my tent. I heard sticks crack under its weight. Not twigs, sticks. Thick ones. It made a full circle, then another, same slow pace. It never touched the tent, but I could feel it out there. Like how you know someone's standing behind you even if you can't see them. Then it whispered, right at the back of the tent, 2 words, quiet, almost like it was testing them out. Luke? Home. My name. It knew my name. I didn't think. Just unzipped the tent, rolled out, and came up into a crouch with the rifle aimed at the tree line. Hit the headlamp and swung the light around. Nothing moved. No eyes, no shadow, just trees. But the smell, God, the smell was awful. Thick and sickly, like blood that had been sitting out too long. There was this weird, sweet rot to it, like something had gone bad in a hot car. I didn't pack anything. Left the tent, the stove, even the food bag I'd tied up in the tree. I just started moving, rifle up, eyes scanning. After about 5 minutes, I picked up the pace. 10 minutes in, I was jogging. Then I was full on running. Didn't stop until I saw the car. I slammed the door, locked it, and sat with the rifle across my lap until the sun came up. Didn't sleep. Didn't turn on the radio. Just stared out the windshield and waited. Every time I blinked, I heard it say my name again. When it got light, I drove home. Didn't stop, didn't look back. Told myself it was a dream, a stress hallucination. Maybe I'd had a fever, maybe I'd sleepwalked. Repeated it while I stood under the shower, scrubbing the stink out of my nose. I didn't go back for the gear. I didn't tell anybody, just left it. 3 nights later, I got home from work around 9:30. Long day, infestation at a bakery, dead opossum in a crawl space. I live by myself out near Canton, to the end of a gravel road surrounded by forest. No neighbors. Closest house is half a mile down the ridge. I was microwaving some leftovers when the lights flickered once and went out. Total blackout. No street lights out there, no backup, just pitch black. I grabbed the flashlight and headed out back to check the breaker. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, I smelled it. Same smell, that thick, metallic rot. Same sick sweetness. It slammed into me like a wave. I froze and aimed a flashlight toward the tree line, and I saw them, footprints, in the mud. Huge bare feet, too wide, with long, flat toes like something that had never worn shoes. The prints came out of the trees and led straight up to my back steps, then stopped. No prints going back, no trail out, just mud. Like whatever it was walked up, stood there and vanished. I went inside, locked every door and window, slept with the rifle again, didn't sleep much. In the morning, the prints were gone, not smeared or washed away. Gone. The mud was clean, undisturbed, like nothing had ever touched it. My name's Josh, I'm 29, and for years solo hiking was my thing. I'm talking real off-grid stuff. No marked campgrounds, no other people, no phones buzzing, just me and whatever trail cut through the Appalachians. It wasn't about being tough or dramatic. I just liked the quiet. It made everything else feel simpler, at least it used to. Last July, I planned a 3-night loop through a lesser-known trail system near the North Carolina-Tennessee border. I'd found it on an old forum, barely maintained, light foot traffic, supposedly good views on the ridge. It looked perfect. 18 miles total, 2 basic shelters along the way, and a final campsite up on a ridge I'd never tried before. I was honestly excited. I hadn't taken a proper break in months. I packed light. Hammock, tarp, compact stove, food for 4 days, water filter, my old satellite beacon, which had never once failed me, and the usual emergency stuff. Nothing fancy, just the essentials. I parked at a tiny pull-off around 10 a.m. on a Monday, left a folded note under my windshield wiper listing the trail name and expected return. It wasn't for anyone in particular, just a habit I'd picked up. If something went wrong, at least someone might find the car. The hike started off nice. The trail rose fast into hardwood forest, mostly oak and poplar. Ground was soft from rain the week before, and spiderwebs across the path told me no one else had been through recently. I made decent time. Around 4, I found a wide, flat spot by a stream and strung my hammock between 2 maples. That night was uneventful. Bugs were loud, a few raccoons rustled near my gear but didn't stick around. I slept hard, like I usually do after a long day on the trail. Day 2 was when things shifted. The trail got tighter, wrapping around rocky outcrops and steep drops. Trees felt closer, like the forest was pressing in. I didn't see another person the entire day. Didn't even hear anything big moving around. It was quiet in a way that felt off, though I couldn't say why at the time. By 3, I reached the ridge. The view was as advertised. Layers of hills stretching out under a blue sky. It should have felt peaceful, but there was this weird tension in my chest, like my body knew something before my brain caught up. I started boiling water for dinner when I saw it. Through the trees, maybe 50 feet away, a figure, just part of it. Shoulder and half a head peeking from behind a tree. It looked like someone was leaning out, watching. I stood up fast, called out, "Hey, you all right over there?" Nothing. Not a sound, not even a shift of weight. The face looked wrong. No color, no visible clothes, just pale and smooth. I grabbed my flashlight and walked over, trying to keep calm. But there was nothing behind the tree. I circled it, checked nearby rocks, even called out again. Still nothing. No footprints, no sound of retreat. I chalked it up to bark or a shadow playing tricks. Told myself I was tired. That kind of thing happens, right? But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound snapped me awake. I stayed zipped in, listening to the forest. Around 1 in the morning, I heard a snap. Not a squirrel, not wind. It was too heavy. I reached for my headlamp and trekking pole, banged the pole against my mess tin a few times. Usually that's enough to scare off wildlife. This time, nothing ran. Instead, I heard footsteps, not fast, just steady. Human pacing. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. They stopped maybe 20 feet from my hammock. I froze. My hand gripped the pole tight. I could hear breathing, slow, controlled inhales, like someone deliberately trying not to make noise but still failing. I flicked on my flashlight and aimed it toward the sound. Nothing. I said loud, "If you're just hiking through, let me know." Silence. I stayed still the rest of the night. Didn't close my eyes once. Just stared into the trees and waited. As soon as there was daylight, I packed everything. No breakfast, no water. Just shoved gear into my pack and hit the trail. I knew I was supposed to camp one more night before looping back to the car, but screw that. I wasn't spending another night out there. About an hour into the hike, I started hearing it again. Footsteps. They stayed just out of sync with mine. When I stopped, they stopped. When I walked, they picked back up. I even spun around fast a few times, trying to catch whoever or whatever it was. Nothing. It went on like that for miles. Every bend, every rise, I expected to see someone. But the trail stayed empty. Then I reached this clearing with an old fallen log across it. I was tired, moving slower. Just as I stepped over, I caught movement ahead. Something crouched behind a deadfall, long limbs tucked up tight. Skin gray and stretched like someone had pulled it over bones too big. Its head cocked to the side like it was listening. It didn't have ears, or clothes, or anything, just skin, bone, stillness. I froze. Then it stood. It was tall, too tall. Its knees bent the wrong way when it moved, like a broken insect trying to walk upright. I didn't wait. I ran harder than I ever have in my life. Everything blurred, trees, rocks, roots. I didn't care. I just ran until my lungs gave out and my legs turned to jelly. I collapsed by a tree and tried to breathe without making sound. For a few minutes, nothing. Then twigs started snapping again. Off to my left. Then behind me. I stayed pressed against that tree, gripping a rock I'd picked up off the ground without realizing. I turned slowly, trying to see through the brush. Whatever it was, it circled me. Never came into view, just stayed right on the edge, close enough to hear, close enough that I felt watched. Eventually, it went quiet. I waited a long time before moving. I think over an hour. Near the trailhead, things got weirder. First, a rabbit, stripped of its fur, no blood, just pink, raw skin. Then a tree with carvings, crude spirals and jagged lines gouged deep into the bark, almost angry. No patterns I recognized. Then, about half a mile from my car, I came around a bend and stopped dead. A deer skull hung from a vine right over the trail. Below it, rocks laid in a perfect spiral, each about the size of a fist, arranged with purpose. I didn't even slow down. I walked right under it without looking again. When I hit gravel, I almost cried. The car was fine, untouched. I threw my gear in, didn't change, didn't double check anything, just got in and drove. Somewhere around the highway, I realized something was off. My GPS was off, fully powered down. I hadn't touched it. The satellite beacon in my pack? Also dead. It was fully charged before I left. I remember checking. That night, back at my apartment in Asheville, I locked everything. I mean, really locked it. Windows, deadbolts, blinds drawn. I still couldn't relax. Every noise outside, every creak from the building made me jump. I sat on the edge of my bed until after 2, trying to convince myself I just imagined everything. At 3:17 a.m., I heard tapping. Not knocking, not random noise. A slow, rhythmic tap on my bedroom window. I live on the 2nd floor. I stood up, walked to the lamp, turned it on, stepped over to the window. Nothing. I stared through the glass for a long time. The next morning, I found muddy streaks down the sliding glass door leading to my balcony. Long, thin lines like fingers had been dragged down the surface. I went outside to my car. There were handprints on the hood, on the roof. muddy and smudged, with fingers way too long and narrow. No footprints, nothing else. I didn't report anything. What would I even say? I haven't gone hiking since. I'm 38 and work as a paramedic, the kind of job where your meals come in bites between calls, and sleep is more of a suggestion than a reality. I've seen some pretty bad stuff. Wrecks, stabbings, overdoses, but nothing stuck with me like what happened in the Appalachians last fall. It was late October. Me and 3 guys I knew from EMT training decided to go off-grid for a bit. Real old-school backpacking. No phones, no GPS, just topographic maps, compasses, and our gear. We were all into that rugged survivalist stuff. The idea was to get lost on purpose and find our way out. Danny was the kind of guy who could talk his way through a brick wall. Loud, always cracking jokes, even in serious moments. Marcus was quiet, all instinct and sharp eyes, like he expected something to go wrong everywhere he went. Then there was Luke, youngest of us at 23, super eager. He hadn't had time yet to build the usual cynicism the job gave the rest of us. We hit the trail on a Sunday morning. Weather was decent, packs were heavy, spirits were high. The first 3 days were the kind of trip you hope for. Long hikes, eating whatever we could boil or roast, washing off in freezing creeks, nights in hammocks or lean toes depending on what we could throw together. We came across bobcat tracks once and thought we saw one slinking away between the trees, but it didn't stick around. One morning we found a weird pile of deer bones, arranged in this tight spiral on a rock slab. It looked almost artistic. None of us admitted being creeped out, but we moved on faster than usual that day. It was the 4th night when things turned. We were trying to reach this old stream Marcus swore he remembered from a faded topo map. According to him, it would cut miles off our route, so we bushwhacked, moving further off the marked trail. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridges, we were stuck in a narrow valley, trees packed so tight overhead that moonlight barely reached the ground. It got dark real fast, no wind, no frogs, not even bugs. It was the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Sometime after midnight, Luke nudged me awake. "Hey," he whispered, right up close. "There's something walking around out there." I sat up slowly. Danny was already sitting upright, clutching his flashlight like a weapon but not turning it on. I didn't hear anything at first, then I caught it. This soft, steady movement around the edge of our camp. Not a crash or heavy steps, just this careful pacing. It was circling us. I reached for the fixed blade knife I keep on my belt. I knew it wouldn't do much if it was a bear, but it felt better than doing nothing. Except bears don't walk like that. They don't move that slow. And they sure as hell don't walk laps around you without making some real noise. Marcus leaned out of his hammock and whispered, "It's two-legged." We didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat there, listening. The steps eventually stopped, but we never heard them leave. It was like whoever or whatever it was just melted into the woods. Come morning, we found prints. Bare human feet, no shoes, but there were only 3 toes on each one. No claws, no tread, just clean, smooth impressions in the dirt. Right around where we'd set up, circling, like a shark. None of us said much. We packed fast and booked it, covering more ground in a few hours than we had the entire day before. Every 30 minutes or so, one of us would stop and listen. Still no birds, no rustling, just dead quiet like the woods were holding their breath. Around noon, we came over a ridge and spotted a clearing with what looked like a building. My first thought was ranger station, and I swear my knees almost gave out from relief. Even a busted shack would have felt like salvation. It was a cabin, mostly collapsed, roof caved in on the west side. Moss had overtaken the brick chimney, and trees were starting to grow through the structure, but the eastern half still stood. The door hung off one hinge, and half the floor inside was rotted through. Still, it beat sleeping in the open. We kept the fire low that night, just embers. No one was in the mood to eat much. Danny was pacing more than usual. "There's something under the floorboards," he said, "scratching and breathing. I swear to God, something's under us." I told him it was probably mice. "Mice don't breathe like that," he snapped. "It's sweat. It's heavy." I lay down and listened. Took a few minutes, but then I heard it too. This low, thick breathing, like something with fluid in its lungs. Then soft scratching, like long nails dragging on dry wood. It always stopped when we moved, then started again when we were still. We decided to sleep in pairs, taking shifts. Marcus and Luke went first, me and Danny took second. Only Marcus didn't wake up. His eyes were open, mouth too, like he died mid-breath. His skin was clammy and cold, but there were no marks on him, no sign of a struggle, no blood. His pulse had just quit. Luke lost it, screamed, tried to run. I had to tackle him outside, hold him down until he calmed. Danny looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. We buried Marcus behind the cabin, took turns with the camp shovels. Nobody said anything while we worked. We left at sunrise. Didn't bother with breakfast. Barely even filled our water bottles. We just wanted out. But the woods didn't change. Trees looked the same, landmarks repeated. At one point, I swear I saw a sapling we tied a red bandana to on day 2. Late in the afternoon, we found something else. A staircase right in the middle of nowhere. No railings, no platform, just 10 or 12 wooden steps leading up to nothing. They ended 6 feet in the air, covered in moss, leaning a little to one side. Danny stared for a long time. "That wasn't here before," he said. Luke looked like he might throw up. "Don't look at it too long," he mumbled, eyes on the ground. We didn't touch it, just kept moving. But the sound of footsteps followed us for miles, always just behind, always matching ours. By the time we stopped, it was dark again. We tucked ourselves under a rocky outcrop, too tired to care if it was safe. No fire, no talking. I didn't even unroll my sleeping bag, just sat there, knife in hand, trying to stay awake. Danny shook me sometime around 2. Luke's gone. I looked over. His bag was empty, zipped open. The dirt around it showed 2 long drag marks, like something had pulled him away by the ankles. No blood, no struggle, no sound. We sat with our backs together until dawn. Didn't sleep, just waited for something to reach us too. When light finally broke through the trees, we tried to follow the drag marks. They faded out about 20 yards in, but we found his flashlight wedged between some roots, still on. Its lens was smeared with blood. We kept moving, no plan, just forward, south maybe. Hours passed. Then we saw the stairs again. Same ones, same moss, same awkward tilt. But this time, someone was standing on them. Same build as Luke, same jacket, same pants. Only his head hung at a weird angle, like his neck had snapped and never healed right. His arms dangled too low, hands limp at his sides. Then he opened his mouth, way too wide. "You left me," he said. Danny dropped his pack and bolted into the trees, and I was alone. I'm 31 and I work freelance as a wildlife photographer. Most of my gigs are self-directed. I pitch to magazines, sell prints, license footage. It's not glamorous, but I like it. More than that, I like doing it alone. Not because I'm antisocial. I've just learned over time that it's easier to focus when I don't have to explain why I'm sitting still for 5 hours in the mud just waiting for something to blink in the distance. Back in October, I went out to western North Carolina, deep in the Appalachian range. I'd been scrolling through a wildlife forum, mostly hobbyists, a few serious photographers, and one guy messaged me about a forgotten trail up near some ridge that wasn't on modern maps. Said it was prime for red fox sightings, maybe bobcats, even the odd black bear if you were lucky. He'd been there once years ago and swore it was the most alive he'd ever seen the woods. The trail, according to him, used to be part of a ranger route but got shut down in the 80s after a rock slide made the road up unstable. It was never reopened. No one maintained it, no signs, No GPS pin. That sounded perfect to me. I like areas that haven't been trampled by a million boots or droned over by influencers. Places where animals still act like animals. I found an old topo map from a forestry archive online. One of those black and white scans that still smelled like toner in my imagination. There it was. Faint switchbacks up the side of a ridge, ending near an overlook marked with just a tiny X. The start point was behind a boarded-up ranger station about 10 miles down an unpaved road, which probably hadn't seen a grader in decades. My kind of spot. I arrived around 4:30 p.m., parked just off what used to be the service road, but now looked more like a lumpy trail for goats. My gear was stripped down to essentials: one-man tent, freeze-dried meals, a compact stove, thermal camera, DSLR, lenses, and backup batteries. No cell service out there, which I expected. I had a paper map and compass. I'd done at least 30 solo treks like this, so I wasn't worried. The trailhead looked exactly how you'd expect, overgrown, almost apologetically narrow, with leaves thick enough to hide rocks, roots, and sometimes the trail itself. Within 15 minutes, the forest was already swallowing the light. The tree canopy was dense. Layers of branches tangled up so high above that even birds didn't seem to bother flying through them. The air felt still, but I don't talk about atmosphere. I'll just say it was quiet. No birdsong, no insects buzzing, just my boots crunching and the occasional scuff when I caught a root wrong. After about 2 hours of slow climbing, I found this natural clearing. It wasn't big, maybe 20 feet across, but it was flat, dry, and wrapped in pine and thick underbrush. It overlooked the eastern slope, with a distant view that stretched just far enough to remind you how alone you were. I checked the ground. No tracks, no droppings, no disturbed brush. Nothing suggesting another human or animal had been here recently. I set up camp. Tent was up in 15 minutes. I boiled water, ate something pretending to be pasta, then sat back and waited for the light to fade. Around 10:00 p.m., I started slow scans with a thermal lens. It's like watching a silent movie where every actor is hiding behind a tree. For the first couple hours, nothing. One blip might have been a squirrel. Then nothing again. At 2:15 a.m., I heard it, a whistle. 3 notes, crisp, like someone had practiced it. Not a bird, not an echo. It had the sharp edges of something intentional, something with lungs and lips. I turned toward the sound, raised the thermal. Nothing, just cold trees and static. 2 minutes later, it came again, same 3 notes, this time behind me. I turned faster, scanned, still nothing. No heat, no movement, no reason to feel watched, but I did. I stayed seated, camera resting in my lap, just listening. I wasn't blinking much at that point. Didn't want to miss anything. Another whistle, same rhythm, different direction. It was moving, not walking, just repositioning, always outside the range of vision, like it knew exactly how far I could see and stayed just beyond it. At 2:50, I gave up trying to spot it, switched off the camera, moved slowly to the tent, unzipped it without making a sound, slid in with my boots on, and left the flap cracked open, just enough to sprint if I had to. I lay there all night, staring at the ceiling of nylon, waiting for something I couldn't name. At sunrise, the forest was quiet again, but not normal quiet. The kind of quiet where you feel like your own breathing is too loud. I stepped out, stiff and sore, checked around. Nothing disturbed. The clearing looked like a postcard. I told myself it was probably just some weirdo hiker pulling a prank, or a forest local playing games with tourists. I didn't buy it, but saying it out loud helped. I stayed. That second day, I barely left the clearing. I kept scanning, made noise while I walked the perimeter. I even talked to myself a few times just to keep the silence from settling too deep. Nothing, not even a raccoon. It was like the forest itself had packed up and moved out. That night, no fire. I didn't want to give away my location. I sat in darkness, thermal lens aimed at the trees, recording in 5-minute bursts to save battery. At exactly 1:04 a.m., the whistle returned. Same notes, same rhythm. This time it didn't move. It came from the east, right past the trees. I raised the thermal, scanned slowly, and there it was. A heave shape, upright, human-shaped but not quite. The limbs were too long, the head too smooth, the proportions off. It wasn't swaying or breathing visibly, just standing there. I watched for almost a minute, then its arm lifted. It pointed directly at me, then the whistle again. Same 3 notes, no delay this time, like it didn't care if I knew it was watching. I turned off the camera, sat still, couldn't move, couldn't look away. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking up. It was morning. The shape was gone. I packed up fast. The clearing looked untouched, except there were footprints, not mine, not animal. Long, narrow, too many toes. They started at the spot where the shape had been, curved around half the clearing, then stopped. Mid-step, I didn't eat, barely drank, just got everything on my back and started hiking out. The trail felt different going down. The leaves underfoot didn't sound right. Too soft. Like they were damp, but they weren't. Like they were trying to smother sound instead of making it. Halfway down, I stopped to adjust my pack, caught my breath. Then I noticed the silence again. No birds, no wind. Not even the sound of trees settling. I turned around. It was standing between 2 trees, not hiding, just watching. Skin pale like unbaked dough. No hair. Eyes massive, lidless, glossy like black marbles. Its mouth hung open. Not a natural mouth. Just a slit that stretched too wide, too deep, and it was pointing. Again, same pose, same arm, only now I could hear it breathing. Shallow, irregular, like someone trying to imitate breathing without quite understanding how it works. I dropped my pack, took off running, no plan, just instinct. I didn't look back. I knew when I hit the service road because the dirt turned to gravel under my boots. My knees buckled when I saw the car. I dove in, slammed the locks before even starting the engine. I drove until I hit Asheville. Back home, I went through the thermal footage. The clip from that night was still there, grainy, low res, but the shape, still pointing, is unmistakable. But the audio, different. Now the whistle had 4 notes, same tone, but slower, like someone trying to mimic the original but getting it slightly wrong, off key. Just enough to make you feel it in your spine. I scrubbed the video frame by frame. At the exact second the whistle ended, another shape flickered onto the far left of the screen. Smaller, crouched, then gone. I deleted the footage, wiped the card, sold the camera a week later. I told one guy about it, a supply store clerk in Asheville. He looked like someone who'd lived in the woods for decades. When I mentioned the whistle, he paused. 3 notes? He asked. I nodded. He said, "You're lucky it didn't come back with 4. Then he rang me up like I'd ask him about the weather. I still hike, still take photos, but never in that part of the range. Whatever's up there, it can keep the ridge. I'm not going back." My name's Erica, and I've been working as a paramedic in Central Virginia for just over 10 years now. I've handled all kinds of calls. Some tragic, some bizarre, most just exhausting. After a while, they start to blend together. You get good at functioning in chaos. What you don't expect is to be more scared off duty than on it. 3 years ago, in early spring, I went on what should have been a typical solo camping trip. I used to take one every year. No friends, no distractions, just me in the woods for a couple of days. I did it partly to disconnect, partly to clear my head. Working emergency response does something to your brain. It's like your mind's always braced for impact. These trips helped me shake that off. I'd come back a little lighter every time. I never brought music or movies, no podcasts. I liked the silence. I packed light, tent, tarp, basic food, water filter, a few tools and a fixed-blade knife I kept clipped to my hip. Most years I went back to familiar spots. But that spring I decided to find somewhere new, somewhere deeper. I ended up picking this old ranger trail out in the Blue Ridge that I found through a hiker's forum I hadn't visited in ages. Most of the threads were years old. One post from a guy named Curtis B. had a blurry picture of a clearing by a creek. He called it a perfect hidden gem and even dropped coordinates. The thread had no replies, just that one post. It felt obscure enough to be interesting. I left early Saturday morning around 7. Took me 2 hours to reach the gravel lot beside a crumbling ranger station that looked like it hadn't seen a living soul in at least a decade. The road in was all switchbacks and potholes. When I parked, I noticed mine was the only car there. I stepped out, stretched, checked my pack, locked the doors, and started walking. It was 10:30 when I hit the trailhead, if you could even call it that. The path was barely visible, just a faint depression in the brush, littered with pine needles, branches, and dead leaves. There were fallen trees I had to climb over, and sections where I had to crouch to get under low limbs. It felt less like hiking and more like sneaking through a forgotten place. I didn't see another person. No tents, no voices, not even distant dogs barking, just the sound of my own boots and the occasional bird. It was quiet enough that I noticed how dry the pine needles felt underfoot. By 1:15, I made it to the clearing, just like the photo, flat, slightly rocky, and bordered by thin trees. The creek ran about 15 feet away from where I decided to pitch. It was narrow but steady, and the water looked clean enough to drink straight out. I filtered it anyway. Old habit. I set up my tent and tarp in a U-shape so I'd have shelter from wind. Though honestly, it was calm and uneventful. I had a late lunch, pita bread with peanut butter, eaten standing up while staring at the creek. Then I walked small laps around the site, just taking it in. I always did that. Something about knowing your surroundings made it easier to sleep. It was around 6 in the evening when I started heating water for tea, and that's when I heard it. A dull thud. Not loud, not sharp, more like the sound of a foot pressing down into wet ground. Then another. I stopped pouring water and turned toward the sound. Nothing. No movement. No figure. I stared for a good 30 seconds, listening. No wind, no crackling, just complete stillness. Then I went back to the pot, telling myself it was a deer or maybe a branch falling somewhere out of sight. I had tea. Didn't taste like much. By 9, it was dark enough that I crawled into my tent. I left the zipper halfway open to let some air in and watched the fire burn down to soft, pulsing embers. I was drifting off when I heard it again. Footsteps, but they weren't crunching leaves, they weren't clumsy, just soft, heavy thuds, as if something big was moving slowly, deliberately. I held still, knife in hand, pressed against my side. The steps came from the direction of the creek, moved along the left side of my tent, stopped, then continued around the back. I listened to them fade, then silence. I didn't sleep at all. My eyes stayed locked on the tent ceiling. I don't even remember blinking. I kept thinking maybe it was a bear. But bears don't move like that. They're loud. You hear them breathing, snorting. This thing was quiet, intentional. When the sky lightened around 6:30, I finally unzipped the tent and stepped out. First thing I saw were the prints. They made a complete loop around the tent, not just a casual animal wandering by. This was a deliberate path. They weren't boot prints. They weren't paw prints either. They looked human, sort of. 5 long toes, each about as thick as my finger. Broad pads, maybe the length of a dinner plate. No tread, no claw marks. Just clean depressions in the dirt and pine needles. I stared at them for maybe a minute before grabbing my shovel and covering them up. Not because I was scared of anyone else seeing them. There wasn't anyone else. I just didn't want to keep looking at them. I had to move on with the day. Washed my pot in the creek, ate a protein bar I couldn't finish. Around 2 in the afternoon, I decided to hike about a mile down the trail. I needed to move. I needed to not be sitting in that clearing. The hike was uneventful, just me and the trail and my thoughts trying to spin the previous night into something normal. When I got back, I froze. There was a rock sitting in front of my tent. Round, smooth, almost perfectly shaped, about the size of a tennis ball. It was warm to the touch, like it had been left in direct sunlight, but my camp was mostly shaded. It hadn't been there that morning. I picked it up, turned it over. No markings, no moss, no chips or signs of wear. I set it down beside a tree, told myself some kid might have dropped it there years ago and it somehow rolled into place. But I knew that didn't make sense. There were no kids out here. There was no one. That night, I stayed by the fire. Didn't even look at the tent. I kept the flames tall and bright and sat there with my knife in my lap, headlamp around my neck, scanning the tree line every few minutes. Around 2:20 IEM, I saw it. Across the creek, behind a thick tree trunk, something stood there, still, too tall, shoulders too narrow. I couldn't make out details, but the shape was wrong. I clicked my headlamp toward it. The beam landed, but there was no reflection. No eyes, no movement. It just stood. Then it slid backward. That's the only word that fits. It didn't walk, it glided out of sight behind the trees. I backed up, climbed into the tent, zipped it shut, and cut the light. I lay there, clutching the knife, heartbeat pulsing, so hard it felt like I could hear it in my teeth. Then came the breathing, slow, wet. Not labored, just off, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I couldn't place where it came from, but it wasn't far. Maybe 15 feet? Then a moan, low and thick, like it got caught in something before escaping. It climbed slightly in pitch, then stopped cold. I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I don't think I even blinked. When light finally crept in, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. 4 stones were placed around it, one at each corner, identical to the first, clean, smooth, center. I didn't eat, didn't brush my teeth, just packed everything fast, not caring how neatly it fit. I was back on the trail in less than 10 minutes. The way out felt longer. I kept glancing behind me, expecting to see something. A branch moved weird once, and I almost dropped my pack. Every turn looked different, like the forest had shifted just enough to throw me off. I hit the gravel lot around 11. My car was there, but someone, or something, had tied a short piece of twine around the driver's side door handle. Looped twice, knotted tight, dead center. I didn't look around, just cut it, got in and drove. Didn't stop until I was in front of my apartment. 2 weeks later, I got a package, no return address, just my name printed in big black letters. Inside were 6 stones, same size, same texture, same shape. I moved out 3 days later. I haven't gone camping since. I'm Sam, and I've been working as a park ranger in a little outpost outside Henderson, Tennessee, for almost 10 years now. The kind of station that only has one working coffee maker, a stack of weather-worn trail maps, and a corkboard full of weird lost and found items people leave behind. It's not glamorous, but it's my thing. Most days, I patrol the trails, help lost hikers get their bearings, or give talks to 4th graders about bears and poison ivy. Sometimes I help with rescues. Sometimes I pull old beer cans out of creeks. It's steady, quiet work. Nature's got a rhythm, and you get used to it. I've dealt with some strange things over the years. People going off grid, animals behaving weird, even the occasional claim that Bigfoot knocked over someone's tent. Most of it's nonsense. You learn not to flinch. But what happened last October still gets under my skin. It started with a couple of odd reports, nothing formal, just stuff that filtered through the channels. A guy from forestry said he saw smoke trails out by Hawk Ridge. Another ranger mentioned some odd lights flickering near an old service trail we hadn't maintained in years. One of the volunteers swore he heard someone singing in the woods, but it wasn't a song he recognized. It wasn't anything you'd write up, But the supervisor didn't want it turning into a bigger issue if, say, some squatters were setting up shop out there. Someone had to check it out, do an overnight, file a report. No drama. I volunteered. I liked being alone in the woods more than sitting in a folding chair typing out inventory requests. Figured I'd hike in, camp, get some quiet, and be back in time for breakfast. I packed light but thorough. Tent, sleeping bag, MREs, Glock 19, the thermal scope we use for wildlife spotting, a battered field notebook, and the satellite phone that only works when it wants to. Tossed in a headlamp and a backup battery pack for my watch. I didn't expect to use half of it. The trail to the area was a mess. What used to be a footpath was now mostly tree roots and mud. I had to stop several times just to hack through low brush and thorn vines. Took me almost 4 hours to go what should have taken 2. I started wondering if I'd made a mistake volunteering. Then I found a clearing. It was odd. I don't know how else to describe it. Perfectly flat. Like unnaturally flat. There were 7 boulders arranged in a semicircle on one end, looked like they hadn't moved in decades. On the opposite side was this massive old oak tree. It was split clean down the middle, and the inside was blackened like it had been burned from the inside out. The bark around it was gray and brittle. I walked around the whole thing once just to see if someone had carved initials or something dumb like that. Nothing. I set up camp just inside the circle of rocks. Built a little fire pit, ate a freeze-dried meal that tasted like cardboard with spice. The sun went down fast. By 7, I was sitting near the fire, half listening to the crackle and the distant hoot of an owl. When I heard it, leaves crunching. Not a squirrel, not wind. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. I froze. I picked up the scope and scanned the tree line. That's when I saw it, off in the distance. Heat signature showed up bright, humanoid-shaped, but the edges were wrong. Like if you took a person and blurred them out just slightly around the edges. The heat flickered. Not steady like a human body. Like it was leaking. It didn't move, just stood there. I blinked, lowered the scope, raised it again. I stayed still for a while, listening. Nothing. No movement. Not even the usual night bugs. It felt like the forest had paused. About 10 minutes later, I heard a whistle. 4 notes. Slow, rising and falling. Not a tune I recognized. It didn't sound playful. It sounded calculated, intentional. It came from maybe 40 yards into the woods. I didn't answer. Just sat there, hand on my pistol, acting like I hadn't heard it. The fire crackled, but the air felt still. Too still. I stared into the flames for what felt like hours. Eventually, around 11, I crawled into the tent. Left the flap unzipped halfway so I could keep an eye on the firelight. Laid down with my gun next to me, wrapped the sleeping bag up to my chest. My mind kept trying to replay the whistle like it was stuck in a loop. At exactly 2:14 a.m., my watch buzzed and lit up. No alarm, no notifications, just lit up and vibrated once. Then I heard it again. Crunch, 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 footsteps. Close. They were circling the edge of the firelight. Too heavy for a raccoon, too steady for a deer. I stayed absolutely still and leaned forward just enough to peek out the flap. There was something standing just outside the ring of light. It was tall, pale. Its skin, or maybe its clothes, were this gray-white color that didn't reflect anything. It looked like a statue, but it wasn't still. Its limbs twitched, little jerky movements, like it was glitching. The head moved in short, stiff motions, like it didn't quite know how necks were supposed to work. Then it moved. It glided toward the oak. Didn't walk, glided, like its feet skimmed the ground. It reached the oak, bent at the knees like it was made of wire instead of bone, and then dropped to all fours, crawled slowly toward the hollow base. It slipped inside like it belonged there. And then the whistle, same 4 notes, but this time it came from right behind my tent. I turned, heart pounding, pistol raised. The flap behind me moved slightly, like it had been touched. I held my breath. Nothing there. Then I heard whispering right next to the nylon wall. Too low to make out, but rhythmic. Not English, not gibberish either. It had structure, repetition, like someone reciting a poem in a language I'd never heard. It didn't stop, it kept going, over and over. My hands started to go numb from gripping the gun too tight. And then, silence. I don't remember falling asleep, or passing out, or anything. Just light. The tent was lit with morning sun. The fire was long out. The woods looked exactly the same. No footprints, no broken branches. Then I noticed my boots. They weren't where I left them, by the flap. They were 50 feet away, placed perfectly upright, side by side, facing the woods. Inside the left boot was a little bundle of wildflowers, still fresh, dew on the petals. Inside the right boot was a bird skull, clean as bone, the beak pointing straight up. I didn't eat, didn't repack properly. I stuffed everything into my bag and got moving. No breaks, no water. I hiked the full 7 miles back in just under 3 hours, which is fast, even for me. I didn't talk to anyone. Just cleaned my gear and filed the report later. Area clear, no signs of unauthorized activity. 3 days later, a search and rescue guy from the other district dropped by. He had a trail cam photo. Said he thought it caught a bear crawling. It wasn't a bear. The thing was too thin. Long limbs, mid-crawl, no fur, no real face, just a stretched shape moving through the leaves. He looked at me and said, "You ever seen anything like this?" I stared at it, thought of the whistle, the whispering, the flowers, the skull. I said, "No, and I haven't taken an overnight patrol by myself since." I'm a trail guide out in the Blue Ridge region, mostly the stretch between Franklin and Gatlinburg. I've been doing this long enough that my boots have more trail time than my truck. I take folks out on hikes they probably shouldn't be on, help them pitch tents, warn them not to pet wildlife, all that. After years of doing it, you kind of feel like the forest has nothing left to throw at you. I was wrong about that. This was about 2 years ago. I had a weekend off and thought I'd scout a forgotten trail I'd read about in an old forestry report. Just a blip of a path near a spur off the main route by Little Raven Ridge. Wasn't on any modern maps, just faint blazes and rotting posts from way back. I was thinking of building it into a loop for intermediate hikers. Something I could call the Hidden Line or whatever marketing name would stick. It felt like a fun project. Didn't tell anyone the exact route, just mentioned I'd be off the grid till Monday. That's normal. I do solo weekends a lot. I left Friday morning. Pack was light, tent, some freeze-dried meals, GPS that works when it feels like it, usual safety gear. The sky was clear, which didn't matter once I was under the canopy. I hit the last known trail marker around noon and stepped off the maintained path. That's when it all started to feel off. The trees were thicker, ground was uneven, not just roots and rocks. Like the earth itself wanted to roll your ankle. Around 5, I found a clearing surrounded by birch trees. Flat, quiet, no game trails running through. I figured it was as good a spot as I'd find. Set up camp, got a fire going after struggling with the damp wood. The flames hissed in this weird, low way, not like crackling, more like steam leaking. I noted some landmarks in my logbook. Broken ridgeline, 2 possible forks creek nearby. Normal stuff. I crashed around 8:30, sometime after midnight, 12:45, give or take. I woke up to footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching leaves, then nothing. Just silence. I didn't move, just listened. After a few minutes, I told myself it was probably a deer, maybe a raccoon sniffing around. The usual forest noises always seem creepier when you're in a tent alone. I stayed still for a bit, then drifted off again. Next morning, I stepped out and stopped cold. Right outside the tent, someone had stacked 5 stones, balanced perfectly, like a cairn. The top one was tiny, round as a marble. I didn't touch it, didn't even walk close. I just stood there, scanning the tree line. Everything was quiet, no wind, no birds. I packed up a small day bag and followed a faint animal trail downhill to a stream I'd marked. Figured I'd check water flow, maybe find a shortcut back up the ridge. Trail planning stuff. I stopped at a bend in the stream to refill and filter water. That's when I heard it, humming. No tune I recognized, just a slow, repetitive rhythm, like someone was humming a lullaby with no words. It was human, definitely. Not a machine, not wind. I stood up and called out, "Hello?" The humming stopped. Dead silence again. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. My ears were straining for anything. Movement, a cough, footsteps, nothing. It felt like standing in a spotlight, even though I was under trees. I packed up and left fast. When I got back to the camp, the rock pile was gone. In its place was this figure, made from sticks, tied together with rough string, about 10 inches tall, arms too long, legs bent the wrong way. It was standing exactly where the stones had been, facing the tent. I stood there just staring at it, jaw clenched. My first thought was that someone had followed me in, maybe a prankster or some local with too much free time and a weird sense of humor. I didn't like any of the explanations. I ate cold food, skipped the fire, sat in my tent listening to every sound. Every crack or rustle had me gripping my knife. Then sometime past midnight, this clicking started. Not random, rhythmic, like two stones being tapped together. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, tap. Sometimes it was close, sometimes farther off. Sometimes it moved. I stayed still, knife in hand, eyes wide open. Around 2 in the morning, I heard breathing, not mine, not an animal either. It was right outside the tent, wet, uneven. I couldn't look, I just couldn't. It went on for about a minute, then silence. But I didn't move until the sky started getting light. At dawn, I packed everything in 10 minutes and took off. I tried retracing my steps, but nothing looked the same. Landmarks were wrong, logs I remembered were gone. The slope of the ridge had shifted somehow. I pulled out my compass. The needle spun, just kept turning. I stared at it, heart thudding. I've been lost before. This wasn't that, this was something else. The forest itself didn't match anymore. I picked a direction and walked. An hour later, the humming started again, closer this time. It followed me. I turned around, nothing. Then I saw it. Movement up ahead, just past some low brush. A figure, crouched. Looked human at first glance, but off. Limbs were too long, skin pale, ashy. It rocked slightly, facing away. I froze. It started to stand. But not normally. It uncoiled like a puppet on slow strings. Then it turned its head. Only its head. The body didn't move. There was no face, just smooth skin. Blank. No eyes, no mouth. And still the humming continued, like it was coming from that blank oval. I ran. Didn't yell. Didn't look back. Just ran until my legs buckled, then crawled. At some point, the woods started to look familiar again. A fallen pine across a bend I recognized. I hit the old trail. Didn't stop. The last 5 miles felt like a blur. I was shaking, half dehydrated, limping by the time I made it to the service road. A pickup with North Carolina plates was parked there. Driver was a retired forest worker named Jerry. He didn't ask many questions. I didn't offer much. A week later, I went back with 2 rangers. We found the spot. My fire ring was there. Tent imprint too. No rocks, no stick figure, no prints, just trees. When we were packing up, one of the rangers, older guy named Lewis, waited until the other one walked off. Then he asked, "Were you near Ramsey Hollow?" I nodded. "Don't camp there again," he said. "It's not settler land like people think. It's older. We don't patrol that far in for a reason." He didn't say more. I never took clients anywhere near Ramsey again. Just told them the trail's washed out, unsafe, which, honestly, isn't far from the truth. I'm Eric. I've been working as a park ranger for over a decade now, most of it in the Appalachian stretch of Pisgah National Forest. This happened back in 2013. I was still pretty green at the time, still memorizing trail maps, still trying to act like I wasn't a little freaked out sleeping alone in the woods. And definitely still thinking anything strange out there had a reasonable explanation. That was my mindset. Everything had to make sense somehow. It was Labor Day weekend, and nobody wanted to be on call. Too long, too quiet. I volunteered. Figured it'd be 4 slow days of checking in on empty trails and making notes about broken signage or downed branches. The kind of boring that makes the coffee taste better. I got assigned to check out an old backcountry area near a place we call Cat Hollow. It's not a popular spot, pretty far in, almost 10 miles down a narrow spur trail that barely looks like a trail anymore. On our internal maps, it's marked as Site 14. No public markings, no brochures, just a clearing that's technically still a designated site. The only reason I even went out there was because of a note left by another ranger, Grant. He'd been on patrol the week before and logged something that stuck with me. Just one line. Odd sounds near Site 14. Possibly poachers or squatters, metal on wood scraping, heard around 2 a.m. Grant didn't usually report anything unless it mattered. If he mentioned it, it meant something didn't sit right. I headed out early Friday morning, packed light for 2 nights. Tint, rations, flashlight, multi-tool flare gun, sidearm. My radio had fresh batteries, everything checked out. The hike was quiet, nothing unusual at first. By the 8th mile, the trail kind of faded into what looked more like deer paths. The trees closed in. A few trail markers were cracked or leaning. And I had to climb over some downed trees that had probably been there for months. I got to Site 14 a little before noon. It's just a basic clearing, enough space for a few tents, a ring of big stones where people used to make fires, and this old log someone had split and set up as a bench. No trash, no tracks, nothing fresh. Honestly, it looked like nobody had been there in weeks. I did a full lap around the site, checked the brush, all quiet. I made some lunch, pitched my tent, and logged my position over the radio. Around 6, I cooked up dinner and sat by the fire as it burned down. It was just starting to get dark when I heard footsteps coming up the trail behind me. Slow, steady, like someone walking with intention. At first, I figured it was just a late hiker, unusual for that area, but not impossible. I stood up, turned toward the trail, keeping the fire behind me. The footsteps stopped. I called out, "Hey, you all right out there?" "Nothing, just quiet." I flipped on my flashlight, scanned the trees. Nothing moved. I stepped toward the sound, listened. Dead silence. No bugs. No wind, just that weird blanket of quiet that makes your ears feel like they're waiting for something. I backed off and threw more wood on the fire. Told myself it could have been a deer or maybe a bear, but the pacing didn't match. Too clean, too measured. It felt human. By 9:30, it was full dark. I did a sweep around the clearing just to be safe, then zipped myself into the tent. I didn't bother taking my boots off, just laid there on my back with one hand on my sidearm, waiting for every branch to snap and every twig to crack. A little after midnight, something brushed against the top of the tent. Real light, like a fingertip drag. Then it happened again, and again, slower. I held my breath, sat completely still. After a few seconds, I sat up, unzipped the flap just an inch or two, and peeked out. Nothing, just trees and trail. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped out, and circled the tent. No tracks, no broken twigs. Nothing looked disturbed. I stayed up about another hour, just walking slow loops around the fire ring before crawling back into the tent. At exactly 3:17 a.m., my radio crackled. Not a call, just static. Then, this clicking noise like someone tapping 2 rocks together right near the mic. I shot upright and grabbed it. It was Ranger 409, come in. Nothing. Another click. Then, this slow scraping sound. Metal on bark, like someone dragging a knife across tree bark, right next to the receiver. I called again, still nothing. The radio went dead quiet for almost an hour. I didn't sleep. I just stared through the mesh window of the tent, watching the shadows outside. At 4:40, just before the first light, I saw something. There was a shape standing at the edge of the trees, about 15 feet away. It wasn't crouched or anything. It was upright, just standing, tall, maybe 6.5 feet. Thin build, arms at its sides. No face I could see, just a dark shape, standing still. It stayed there long enough for my brain to start asking if I was really seeing it. Then, just like that, it stepped backward into the trees. No sound. Gone. As soon as the sun came up, I packed everything. Fast. No breakfast. No breaks. I didn't speak out loud, I just moved. By the time I was 5 miles out, I radioed in. Told him I was cutting the trip short. Possible trespassers. Some kind of weird interference on the radio. When I got back to base that afternoon, I went to log my report. Before I could say anything, the woman at the desk stopped me. She said, "We got some strange stuff from your radio last night. You kept transmitting." I told her I only used the radio twice, once at 3:17 and again that morning. She pulled up the log. Between 12:10 and 5:05, my radio had pinged them 12 times. Static every time. Once they said they caught faint breathing, and at 3:51 a.m., a voice, male, low, whispered one word, "Come back." I didn't sleep that night. About a year later, 2 hikers went missing in the Cat Hollow area. They were found a few days later, 6 miles off the trail. No shoes, no injuries. Their tent had been slashed open, but nothing was taken. They didn't remember a thing after zipping up for the night. One of them came back to the station months later, just to talk. He said they both woke up at the same time, right before dawn. Just sat there, frozen. Said it felt like someone was outside the tent, just standing there, watching, waiting for them to move. I still work the forest, still take solo shifts sometimes, but I haven't gone back to Site 14, not alone, not again.